So there was a hell of a report that got dropped by Politico that was very damning to President Obama and his administration. And this was an article was talking about how Obama let Hezbollah off the hook. How he pretty much let Hezbollah grow from a small time organization into a global, not only terrorist supporting group, but in fact a global drug dealer essentially. Because Hezbollah now has got a whole system working around drugs and getting them inside. Because right now Hezbollah has a whole money laundering slash drug scheme going on, and the US is the target. In this report, they talked about Project Cassandra, which was a task force put together by the DEA back in 2008, and they were looking into the drugs that were coming into across the borders. Now, as this report goes on to say, it pretty much talked about how at the time Obama was going through his nuclear agreement with Iran, and that he was trying to make sure that was going well as trying to ease some tensions in the Middle East, or at least that's what Obama was trying to do. Whether that was actually successful is another story, and I guess we can kind of tell by the state of the Middle East right now that it wasn't successful. But in doing this, in trying to get this deal with Iran and trying not to ruffle too many feathers with Iran, he let Hezbollah grow, and he let them grow into an international arms dealer, drug dealer, terrorist supporting organization, to the point where Hezbollah is an actual legitimate political party. So the DEA spent a long time using all sorts of information, informants, wiretaps, and anything else they can get their hands on across 30 different US departments in order to get as much information on Hezbollah as possible. And they came across a cocaine, or essentially a giant worldwide cocaine scheme. And as it said, it was talking about how Hezbollah was shipping cocaine from Latin America to West Africa and on to Europe and Middle East and throughout Venezuela, Mexico, and the United States. Now, essentially how this scheme worked was a giant circle. It would be that the money that was laundered would go in to getting these cars, these cars that were then being transferred all the way back to Africa in order for resale. And during this money that was getting used throughout this resale was going two ways. It was going back in first to funnel the cash flow for Hezbollah, and the rest of it was being used in order to pay and finance Latin American countries to transport their drugs into the US, including countries such as Colombia and Venezuela. And of course, you can't talk about smuggling drugs without talking about Mexico in that regard. While this was going on, while the DEA was tracking this all down, it turns out that the Obama administration was putting in blocks every which way in order to stop this. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why? Why would Obama want to stop an investigation into Hezbollah, into possible drug trafficking and weapon trafficking schemes? Well, it's for a couple different reasons, and the main one had to do with Obama really wanted his Iran deal. He really, really, really wanted it. And early on, when the US government was doing deals with Iran, Iran actually specifically told them that they wanted the US to lay off on Hezbollah a little bit. So Obama did. As a show of good faith to the Iranians, he laid off Hezbollah and let them grow. This was about the worst thing he could possibly do, because for a long time, Iran's been the one that everyone's worried about in the Middle East. They're the big power over there. They're the ones that the U.S. They're the one that could actually kind of combat U.S.'s massive power, although U.S. still is a lot stronger than they are. But what now has happened is this has allowed Hezbollah, another smaller time group, to grow and build themselves into a huge military-industrial complex. So now in the Middle East, Iran had the nuclear arms program put in place, and then since then there's been a lot of problems of Iran not following the proper procedure, of even possibly Iran, and actually one was Iran opened, after this was signed, two new nuclear plants, and that was known and approved by the Obama administration just before he left office, about the last year or so. So Iran doesn't really have too much countermeasures in place. Sure, it slowed them down on trying to work towards a nuclear weapon as long as they're following the procedures, which of course I'm sure they're trying to get around one way or another. But now on top of that, we have Hezbollah, who have now grown themselves to be quite a good dominating force. And since Iran and Hezbollah have good ties together, this really does not bode well for the US and Western countries. And it does not, certainly does not, bode well for Israel. And these blocks towards the investigation were coming from all over. They were coming from Homeland Security, they were coming from the Justice Department, the Treasury Department, they were coming from pretty much Obama himself. No matter which way these people went, they just could not get around Obama's administration trying to prevent them from doing their jobs. This report also talked about how the administration declined requests by Project Cassandra and other authorities to file criminal charges against major players such as Hezbollah's high-profile envoy to Iran, a Lebanese bank that allegedly laundered billions in alleged drug profits, a central player in a U.S.-based cell of Iranian paramilitary Quds force, and the State Department rejected requests to lure high-value targets to countries where they could be arrested. And as a result of this, it says multi-ton loads of cocaine enter the United States and hundreds of millions of dollars going to a U.S.-designated terrorist organization with vast reaches. So what Obama did by not allowing the DEA to do their job is he allowed millions of tons of drugs to get across the border that can be consumed by the citizens, especially going into areas where there's already big drug problems. So that's going to be going there, and then on top of that, you've sent all that money that people had to use to pay for those drugs, all that money got sent overseas to a terrorist organization that Obama should have been trying to stop this whole time. Jesus fucking Christ. The job of the US president is to keep the people safe. Obama willingly let the people in danger and sent that money away so that way he could make his nuclear deal. The nuclear deal was very polarized too, especially at the time. A lot of people were against it for various reasons, but most of the main one that most people were against is saying how Iran had tore up just about every other contract that the US and them had signed and had never honored them, so why would they be expected to honor this one, especially one concerning something like their ability to get nuclear arms. When you're negotiating with a country that has the most nuclear arms in place, if we're looking at this from Iran's point of view, then it would kind of make sense to sort of play ball, make it look like you're playing ball, when in fact you then are building your arsenal supply up, which it almost seems like they've been doing. Because one thing that Iran has done is there's supposed to be UN or at least US investigators and inspectors that come in to check these facilities, these nuclear facilities. There have been times where the Iranians check it themselves, grab the samples themselves, and send them off to the officials. Well, how do we know that these are legit, that these are taken and these aren't tampered with, that they're not trying to cover the fact that they have been making fuel rods, making plutonium for their warheads? And there have been some evidence of some sites of being sanitized, scrubbed clean, which showed that there was something going on there that they didn't want US officials or UN officials to know about. So essentially, Obama used many of his American citizens as a form of, well, essentially they were casualties inside of Obama's geopolitical agenda. It's really sad to see because drugs can really affect people's lives. They fuck people's lives up now. And up here in Canada, and Ottawa especially, we have a fentanyl crisis. This is literally killing our kids. High school age kids are ODing and dying. I mean, when we look at this in terms of what Obama's done, how many people have died because of this? How many people have overdosed on drugs or have had murdered, let's say, that's a good one, who's murdered in order to get their fix? Who's stolen in order to get their fix? Who's done terrible things while on their drugs? Who's committed terrible crimes while on their drugs? Everybody, one of those, are a victim of Obama's nuclear deal with Iran. He should have been focusing on Hezbollah. He had plenty of opportunity. He was given plenty of warning that Hezbollah was doing this, but he didn't listen and he didn't act. Just a few of the characters that managed to get away because of the block that Obama kept putting in place, or at some of his administration and some departments were putting in place. One man was Ali Fayyad, and he was for nearly 2 decades in custody by the Czechs. The top Obama administration official declined to apply serious pressure on the Czech government to extradite him to the United States, even as Putin was lobbying aggressively against it. He had been indicted in U.S. courts on charges of planning the murder of U.S. government employees, but he ended up getting sent to Beirut, and he is believed to be back in action selling his weapons in Syria. Then we also have somebody only known as Ghost, and Ghost is one of the biggest cocaine traffickers, including to the U.S., as well as major supplier of conventional and chemical weapons for use by Syrian President Bashar Assad against his people. This was another person that the DEA and the rest of these agencies couldn't go after because of the blocks put in place. And then probably one of the most infamous of them is Abdallah Saifuddin, which is Hezbollah's longtime envoy to Iran. And he's considered the linchpin of Hezbollah's criminal network. The Justice Department refused to allow investigators to look into him or prosecute him. And then finally, we also have Hezbollah's military wing. They were banned from looking or doing anything with Hezbollah's military wing, which is an ongoing criminal enterprise under a federal mafia-style racketeering statute, blocked by administration and declined to designate Hezbollah a, quote, significant transnational criminal organization, end quote, and blocked other strategic initiatives that would have given the task force additional legal tools, money, and manpower to fight it. Former Obama administration officials said they were guided by broader policy objectives and that some law enforcement efforts were undoubtedly constrained by those concerns. Former officials denied that they derailed any action against Hezbollah or its Iranian allies for political reasons. But that's not really the case, as more people have spoken up. Because again, one thing had to do with this Iran deal, and a lot of people were talking about how desperate Obama was to get this deal. And I think one of the reasons is Obama, one thing that became very clear about him, is that Obama wanted to leave behind a legacy, which he did. And without a doubt, Trump is trying to tear down at every turn. This was going to be part of Obama's legacy. Essentially for him, he thought this was going to be the deal that puts everything right in the Middle East. He thought, or at least that's what he wanted it to look like. He thought this was going to be the deal that takes the teeth away from Iran. And he did this in this area. This is what Obamacare was supposed to be about, and several other areas where he was trying to make his legacy. So everything that Obama did and the way that he handled Hezbollah throughout his campaign, in no doubt in my mind, has to do with him wanting to get this deal across, wanting to get his legacy in place before he left office. Another good area you could definitely see this would have to do with the assassination of Osama bin Laden, because it came out just a few years ago, or people are still, arguing whether it's true, although it seems to be pretty damn true to me, is that when it came down to what happened with Osama bin Laden, the Pakistanis had him and gave the information to America, told America to wait, I think it was a week, and then they were going to come out and say that they did it together, that Pakistani forces and the American and SEAL Team 6 were the ones who got Osama together. But then as soon as Osama bin Laden was killed, Obama came out to say, we got him. So this is why Obama put so many roadblocks in place for this DEA investigation, this Project Cassandra. He put so many in place because if anything was to possibly put that deal off, then a big part of his legacy would be completely destroyed. In fact, on top of this, one Obama-era Treasury official, Catherine Brower, in little notice written testimony presented last February to the House of Committee on Foreign Affairs, acknowledged that, quote, under the Obama administration, these Hezbollah-related investigations were tamped down for fear of rocking the boat with Iran and jeopardizing the nuclear deal, end quote. The final agreement for this nuclear deal was introduced on January 7, 2016, or at least it was the final agreement. It wasn't implemented yet. But then within months of this happening, the task force that was taking care of Project Cassandra, it was completely dead. Everything was gone. All the resources were gone. All the leads were gone. This can be explained by one quote by one man who used to work on the task force called Asher. He says, quote, the closer we got to the Iran deal, the more these activities went away. So much of the capability, whether it was special operations, whether it was law enforcement, whether it was treasury designation, even the capacity the personnel assigned to this mission, it was assiduously drained almost to the last drop by the end of the Obama administration. As a result, the U.S. government lost insight into not only drug trafficking and other criminal activity worldwide, but also into Hezbollah's illicit conspiracies with top officials in the Iranian, Syrian, Venezuelan, and Russian governments, all the way up to President Nicolas Maduro, Assad, and Putin, according to former task force members and other current and former U.S. officials. And probably one of the worst things that ended up happening out of this is the money that was being laundered through this giant scheme by Hezbollah. The money was being used to kill American soldiers. During the Iraq War, there was an IED, an improvised explosive device that they called, explosive form penetrator. And it was the armor-piercing charge were so powerful that they were ripping M1 Abrams tanks apart. This was being used by Iraqi Shiite militia members in order to take out the American soldiers that were over there at the time. As they began looking into the cash flows, where this was coming from, they managed to trace it back that Hezbollah was using the money through this car deals and drug scheme, this worldwide drug scheme that they were doing. They were using the funds from that in order to pay for these IEDs, get them into the hands of these Shiite militia members, and then that's when they were planted in place. This resulted in the death of hundreds of U.S. military personnel. This was all funded by Hezbollah during the Iraq War. What seems to be very clear about this, from this whole thing, is that throughout this scheme that Hezbollah is running, it seems they are indirectly attacking America. They are using their connections, they are using this scheme in order to get drugs into America and attack its population through that way, while then reaping the benefits of the monetary reward. And on top of this, they are then trying to present themselves as victims in the situation in the Middle East in order to get worldwide sympathy for them, which happened a lot under Obama. They present Israel as the enemy, Israel as being the problem. And a lot of people are willing to go along with that. But as we can see, Hezbollah is running a covert drug operation to get into America. They're using Colombia, Venezuela, Mexico in order to smuggling these drugs in. And in fact, as we've watched, the numbers have continued to grow. The amount of drugs going in, the amount of money that is being sent back to Hezbollah. But time and time again, despite the warnings, Obama did nothing. And as it says here, it says, by early 2009, Obama's national security team battled down Project Cassandra's increasingly urgent warnings as being overly alarmist, counterproductive, or untrue, or simply ignored them, according to Kelly, Asher, Malls, and other participants in and out of government, and many of those participated inside of Project Cassandra. But by following the money, though, Asher had become convinced that the task force wasn't overhyping the threat posed by Hezbollah criminal activity. It was significantly underestimating it, because Hezbollah's drug trafficking was bankrolling its Islamic jihadist military wing and joint ventures with Iran, as Asher would later testify before Congress. It represented, quote, the largest material support scheme for terrorist operations, end quote, the world had ever seen. Eventually, it came out that the Beirut-based Lebanese Canadian bank was also holding back billions of dollars of this money. They were laundering it for Hezbollah in order for them to finance this. whatever their operation happened to be, whether it was the IEDs or whether the ongoing drug operation. They're the ones that have been laundering the money. Project Cassandra managed to trace a lot of the money from these car dealerships and a lot of the money that was going through the drug traffickers all the way back to this bank. And because of this, it came out that there are some dealerships that are being owned and operated inside the U.S. that are fronts for Hezbollah and their group in order to sell their drugs, their cars, and launder the money. It's all part of the scheme. This is all part of the way you clean the money before it gets back and you put it back into circulation. So you have your dirty money, you got to get it clean. There's a way to do that, and it's through legitimate business. And that's why these dealerships are in place inside the U.S. It's a base of operation for these people to work inside the U.S. and make the sales and then launder that money and send that money back to this bank. Now, when this came out, federal authorities filed a civil action suit against the bank in February 2011 and later seized $102 million, ultimately forcing it to shut down and sell its assets without admitting wrongdoing. But the Justice Department never filed the criminal charges and also stymied investigation into other financial institutions and individuals of that task force agent targeted as part of the planned RICO case. The Obama White House said privately that it feared a broader assault on Lebanese financial institution would destabilize the country. Soon afterwards, one of the agents that worked for Project Cassandra, his name was Kelly, said he ran into one of the unit's top prosecutors and asked if there was something going on in the White House that would explain why we can't get criminal filings. He ended up saying, quote, "You don't know the half of it. Right now, we have 50 FBI agents not doing anything because they know their Iran cases aren't going anywhere." And it turned out that after 2012, when Obama won re-election in office, he even took an even more overt attempt at stamping out this investigation into Hezbollah. So he even ramped it up after he got back into office. Maybe that's an increase in confidence or something, I'm not sure. But what was clear is by the end of all this, Obama refused to act in order to stem Hezbollah's actions. He's allowed the flow of drugs in order to come in. He's allowed the flow of money to go back to Hezbollah, and he has allowed Hezbollah to grow. And he did this in the name of furthering his legacy, and he made all sorts of concessions that he never should have. Mostly during the Iran Nuclear Deal, he made concessions that they never should have. And because of this, Hezbollah has become a massive terrorist organization, a massive drug organization worldwide that is targeting the U.S. This seems to be maybe where a large part of our drug problem has come from over these last decade or two. It has to do with Hezbollah putting the drugs in there to try and fuck with America and everybody in the West. Obama's legacy had not been looking good as of recent, especially the way that Trump had been trying to tear it down. But this is just damning evidence of the President of the United States more or less willingly allowing Hezbollah to do this for his own personal image, his own personal glory. That's gotta be one of the worst things Obama could have done in office. And I gotta say, I was never an anti-Obama person for this, and I'm still not, but holy shit, it definitely makes you lose a lot. If you had respect for the guy, it makes you lose a lot for him when you hear this sort of stories coming out. So it appears that this Christmas time was not a good time for leaders in the West. For Canada and America, Trudeau was found guilty by Ethics Commissioner, and Obama's legacy gets torn down just even more, and quite roughly, by Politico as this all gets exposed. But this needs to be exposed. This is the sort of thing we need to hear about. So I'm glad that this report did come out of Politico, but damn, it really does hurt Obama's image. I want to thank you all for joining me on the podcast today. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion. I hope you all had a great Christmas and hope you all have a great New Year, and I'll see you in 2018.